You know that feeling, right? When you're having a moment of just profound beauty or joy, it's so big it almost hurts. But then, almost immediately, your mind just gets flooded with the awareness of all the awful stuff happening out there in the world. It's this incredibly uncomfortable, deeply human feeling, and that's what we're going to get into today.
I mean, just look at this. On one side, you have these small, perfect, deeply real moments of what it means to be alive. And on the other, the brutal, undeniable realities of our time. These things aren't happening on different planets. They're happening on the same day, maybe even in the same hour. So the real question is, how on earth are we supposed to hold both of these truths at the same time?
Okay, so let's try to ground this in a real moment. Let's talk about a perfect day. Picture this, okay? It's a perfect spring day in Vancouver. You're eating some amazing falafel right by the Lost Lagoon. You take a walk through a rhododendron garden, and it's just exploding with color. You're holding the hand of someone you've loved for 3 decades, and you're watching the sun glitter on the ocean. In that moment, everything feels right. And that feeling, it is absolutely real. It's not some fantasy. That sense of joy, of peace, that's a genuine and honestly an essential part of being a human being. But then it starts to creep in, doesn't it? Even in that perfect, beautiful moment, this other reality just pushes its way in. It's the news alert you saw on your phone, the headline you scrolled past, that awareness of all the conflict and suffering out there. And this isn't just some abstract thought exercise. No, it's a physical thing, a literal stomach ache. It's this feeling that your body, your actual physical self, cannot compute how these two wildly different realities can exist at the exact same time. So why does it hurt so much? Why does it feel so physical, so real? Well, it turns out a big part of the answer is actually wired right into our own biology. So why is this so hard? The reason we have this intense internal conflict? Well, the truth is, our brains were simply never, ever built for this. See, our brains, and especially our prefrontal cortex, evolved for life on a village scale. Think of it like this. It's a new, fragile piece of hardware that was designed to handle immediate, local stuff. Threats and relationships right in front of us. It was not designed to process a constant, 24/7, planetary-scale fire hose of information. Just think about that for a second. We are biologically wired to intimately know maybe a few dozen people. But now, thanks to our screens, we can be exposed to the joy and the suffering of thousands of people all over the globe before we've even had our coffee. Our evolutionary wiring is just completely overwhelmed. And this leads us to what the author calls the comfortable lie. It's this deep-seated desire to believe that the people enjoying a beautiful park are a totally different species from the people committing atrocities. But the truly unsettling reality is, they're not. The same human hardware is capable of both profound beauty and unimaginable horror. Okay, so if our brains are overwhelmed and there's no easy answer, how are we supposed to live with this? Well, the key isn't finding a solution, but maybe finding a new way to see, a new framework. And this is absolutely crucial. That perfect moment by the water, the joy you felt, it isn't a lie. The fact that terrible things are happening somewhere else doesn't make your beautiful moment any less real. It is genuine. And here's the other side of that same coin. The existence of all that horror and suffering doesn't prove that your moments of beauty and tenderness were just some naive illusion. Both are true. Both are real. This is what's called the practice of lucidity. It's not about finding some magical sense of peace or resolving the conflict. It's about building the capacity to see the whole messy, contradictory picture all at once, and refusing to let one truth erase the other. Because here's the thing, amidst the constant, never-ending feed of horror, these other realities are also happening. A runner breaks an impossible record. A community rebuilds something precious that was destroyed. These small, real things, they're just as true as the awful headlines.
So what does this actually look like in practice? How do we build this lucidity into our day-to-day lives? What does it mean?
It doesn't mean you stop seeking out beauty. You absolutely do not stop going to the park. The key difference is that you go knowing. You carry that awareness with you. It's the total opposite of blissful ignorance. It's about choosing to show up with your eyes wide open to it all. This isn't about finding some grand piece of wisdom or a permanent fix that makes it all okay. It's about the simple, powerful, relentless act of just continuing. We go, we feel the immense weight of it all, we come back a little bit changed, and then we go again. So what does this practice actually involve? First, you name the machinery. That just means you acknowledge the systems that cause harm, but you don't let them paralyze you. Second, you attend to the world. You focus on what's right in front of you, the part you can actually touch, instead of trying to fix everything all at once. Third, you constantly adjust your frame to hold both truths, the beautiful and the terrible. And finally, you connect with what's good, right here. You hold the hand anyway. And let's go all the way back to that physical feeling, that stomach ache. The big takeaway here is that it's not a sign that you're broken. It's not a bug. It's a sign of honesty. It's your fragile human system working exactly as it's supposed to when it's faced with an impossible truth. At the end of the day, we just have to find a way to live inside this tension. We're living in a story that doesn't have a neat and tidy ending, a poem that doesn't resolve, because the world itself doesn't resolve. And maybe that's the only real truth we can hang on to. The world doesn't resolve. It doesn't find a neat conclusion. It only continues. And our job is simply to continue right along with it, with our eyes and our hearts as wide open as we can manage.
It is a feeling that almost all of us have experienced at some
Oh,
point.
absolutely. It's universally relatable.
Right. Like you are sitting somewhere beautiful. Maybe you're having a quiet cup of coffee on a sunny morning or laughing with a friend, and you just feel this profound sense of peace.
Just totally relaxed.
Exactly. And then, almost out of muscle memory, you pull out your phone, you open your news feed, and instantly, that serene moment is violently shattered by the sheer scale of global suffering.
Yeah, it's a very specific kind of whiplash.
It really is.
Yeah.
You are looking at a screen, completely safe in your physical environment, but your stomach physically drops. It feels like you've actually been punched.
Because of that stark contrast, right? The contrast between our immediate peaceful surroundings and the horror happening simultaneously on the exact same planet.
And that really is the mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring an incredibly profound juxtaposition found in a stack of sources you have shared with us.
It is a really fascinating, complex stack of materials we've got today.
It is. We have this deeply personal journal entry detailing a perfect spring day at Vancouver's Stanley Park. And it's placed right alongside a horrifying global news feed from that exact same day, Sunday, April 26, 2026.
Yeah, and alongside that journal entry, the sources include analytical responses featuring original poetry about the psychological toll of this contrast. Plus, we have a breakdown of a 12-part conceptual series called The Comfortable and Dangerous Lie.
And a stark, unvarnished list of global news events from that specific weekend, which I should note was exceptionally heavy.
It really was.
The source material outlines major global flashpoints happening simultaneously. We're talking about ceasefire violations between Israel and Lebanon, political violence erupting at the U.S. White House Correspondents' Dinner, and naval blockades in the Strait of Hormuz related to an escalating conflict with Iran.
And just to be clear, our goal today isn't to analyze the politics of any of those events or to take any sides.
Right, exactly. We're simply reporting the events as detailed in the source material to illustrate the state of the world on that specific day.
Because what we really want to understand is the human reaction to them.
Exactly. We're going to explore why that contrast between the personal and the global literally hurts us, how our biology is wired to handle it, and how we can achieve what the sources call lucidity in a world of extreme contradictions.
And to really understand that, you have to start with the physical reaction, that stomach ache the author describes.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the author paints this incredibly vivid picture of Lost Lagoon in Stanley Park.
Sounds gorgeous.
It is. They're sitting on a bench eating a falafel platter. The rhododendrons are in full bloom, practically glowing. The squirrels are playing. The birds are singing. And the author is holding hands with their wife of 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah, they describe the beauty of the moment as being, quote, too much to fully fit in the heart, unquote. I mean, it is the definition of an idyllic human experience.
But then comes the brutal pivot.
The pivot to the screen in their pocket. Right in the background of this perfect day is the news feed. 12 people dead in separate school shootings in Turkey.
Just devastating.
A drone strike hitting a UN aid truck in Darfur. And the assassination of Mali's defense minister, Sadio Kamara. He was killed by a suicide car bomb at his home alongside his wife and 2 of his grandchildren.
It's just an overwhelming amount of tragedy to process all at once.
It is, and the author notes that looking at this juxtaposition, the glowing rhododendrons and the massacres happening in the exact same breath, literally gave him a stomach ache. His body just could not comprehend it.
And, the sources offer a brilliant biological explanation for this physical rejection. They refer to our brains as legacy hardware.
Legacy hardware. I like that term.
It makes a lot of sense when you think about what evolution actually gave us over millions of years. It gave us a nervous system and a prefrontal cortex, which is the late, thin, fragile regulatory layer of our brain.
Right.
And that layer was designed exclusively to detect threats and manage relationships within a village of maybe 30 to 50 people.
So we're basically operating on ancient specs. It's
Mm.
like trying to run a massive modern virtual reality simulation on a clunky 1990s desktop computer.
That is a perfect analogy.
The hardware just crashes,
Yeah.
right?
Ha.
Because it literally cannot process the sheer volume of inputs.
Exactly. Our brains were built for proximity. They were built to care intensely about the people we can see, touch, and hear. They were absolutely never designed to process planetary scale suffering.
That makes sense.
So when you are sitting by a beautiful lagoon and your screen suddenly delivers 1,000 tragedies from across the globe before breakfast, that stomachache you feel isn't a metaphor.
It's not just cognitive dissonance.
Right. It is an honest physiological rejection of an impossible scale. Your body is basically screaming, I am built for proximity, this is not proximity, and yet it is all happening right now.
But wait, let me jump in here and ask a specific question just to play devil's advocate.
Sure, go ahead.
If I am sitting in Vancouver and I logically understand that I am safe, and I know the news is happening thousands of miles away, why does the body register it as an immediate physical threat?
That is the million-dollar question.
Like, why isn't it just a sad passing thought? My brain knows I'm not in danger.
Because your autonomic nervous system does not know the difference between a pixel and a predator.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the logical part of your brain, that thin prefrontal cortex, is easily overridden by the older, deeper parts of the brain that govern the fight or flight response.
So it just bypasses the logic entirely.
Completely. When you see images of violence, your legacy hardware assumes the violence is happening in your immediate village. Because for 99% of human history, if you saw violence, it was happening in your village.
Okay, that makes total sense. The hardware just hasn't caught up to the technology. But obviously, we can't walk around with a stomachache all day, every day.
No, we have to function.
Right. So how does our psychological software compensate for this hardware glitch?
Well, we invent stories to protect ourselves. We have to. Otherwise, the sheer volume of horror would paralyze us completely. And this brings us to one of the most provocative concepts in the materials, the 12-part series map.
Ah, the comfortable and dangerous lie.
Yes, specifically Episode 1, which introduces the comfortable lie, along with Episode 4, what the experiment said, and Episode 5, the slow creep.
I want to stop you right there for a second, because reading through the sources, my immediate visceral reaction to atrocities like, say, looking at the guards at Abu Ghraib is, I would never do that. Those people are wired fundamentally differently than I am.
That is exactly what everyone thinks.
Are the sources telling me I am wrong about my own brain?
It is incredibly uncomfortable to hear, but yes, that instinct you just described, that absolute certainty of your own moral superiority, that is exactly what the materials call the comfortable lie.
Wait, really? So just believing I wouldn't do it is the lie?
Yes. It is our desperate belief that we are categorically different from the people who commit atrocities. It is the firm belief that if we lived in the 1940s, we would have been the ones hiding Anne Frank. Or that the people ordering drone strikes are a different species of human altogether.
But history and behavioral science tell a very different story, don't they?
A completely different story. Episode 4 dives heavily into classic behavioral experiments, like the Milgram shock experiments and the Stanford prison experiment.
Right, the ones where ordinary people did awful things.
Exactly. We often think of cruelty as the result of inherent monstrousness, but those experiments proved mechanically that situational variables are what drive human cruelty.
Not some evil gene.
Right. When you place ordinary people in a system that rewards obedience and diffuses personal responsibility, those randomly assigned roles can produce genuine cruelty within days. The ordinary face is often the one behind the lever.
And it is not like someone just wakes up one day and decides to do something horrific.
No, not at all.
The materials describe this mechanism in Episode 5 as the slow creep. The descent into terrible behavior is rarely one giant, dramatic leap into the abyss. It is a series of small, highly defensible compromises.
Think about how that actually plays out in real life. You make one small compromise to keep your job or to avoid standing out, and that sets a new floor for your behavior.
And then the next compromise sets a new floor.
Exactly. You slowly revise what normal looks like step by step, until you end up in a room participating in a system that you never could have imagined entering a year prior.
Here is where it gets really interesting, tying into episode 3, the water we swim in. It reminds me of the boiling frog analogy.
Wow, that's a good comparison.
We all think we would jump right out of the pot, but the sources argue we are actually soaking in ambient cultural normalization.
Yes, the violent political rhetoric, the manipulative advertising, the constant low-level hostility online, it is all ambient. No one is standing on dry land evaluating this objectively. We absorb the temperature of the water around us.
And eventually, we become carriers of what we have absorbed.
Perfectly said.
Okay, but let me push back hard on this. If we are all just fragile legacy hardware, soaking in toxic cultural water, and highly susceptible situational variables, doesn't that effectively excuse terrible behavior?
I can see why it feels that way.
Like, if it's all just biology and socialization, where's the accountability?
That is the ultimate tension the sources grapple with. Understanding the machinery of human nature doesn't absolve us. It clarifies things. It forces us to move from engaging in moral theater to actually understanding the moral architecture of our society.
Okay, the moral architecture.
Right. And to understand that architecture, we have to look at the players involved. Specifically, what Episode 7 calls the exploiters and Episode 9 calls the exceptions.
Let's talk about the exploiters first. Because if we have this predictable biological machinery, someone is bound to use it against us.
Precisely. Exploiters, whether you're talking about concentrated wealth, corporate algorithms, or political leadership, they succeed by reverse engineering our desires and mapping our basic human drives to consolidate power.
How does that actually work mechanically?
Well, think about the legacy hardware we discussed earlier. An algorithm or a political campaign does not just randomly inject you with hate. It studies your biology.
It looks for the vulnerabilities.
Exactly. It sees that your brain rewards you with dopamine for feeling safe inside your in-group, and that you are highly alert to threats from an out-group. So it artificially stimulates that ancient survival mechanism by feeding you constant, exaggerated threats about the other side.
That is deeply unsettling. It weaponizes our biological need for village security on a global scale.
Yes. To keep you clicking, to consolidate power, or to maximize ad revenue, it licenses the worst in us by wrapping it in the language of survival.
But the sources do not just leave us in the dark there. They highlight the exceptions in episode 9, when it holds. The people who actually stood up when the situational variables were demanding compliance.
Yes, the true exceptions. People like Joe Darby, the whistleblower who turned in the Abu Ghraib photos, or the people who came forward against Jeffrey Epstein at immense personal risk, or even the individuals in the Milgram experiment who simply refused to push the button and walked out.
What I appreciate is that the materials do not romanticize these people as magical superheroes.
No, they report on conscience very accurately. It is rare, it is fragile, it is highly context-dependent, and it is frequently punished by the group.
Conscience isn't a myth, but it is an incredibly vulnerable variable.
And adding to the immense complexity of that variable is early childhood trauma, which they get into in Episode 6, What Was Done to Us.
Right, the research on AC's adverse childhood experiences.
Exactly. This isn't just about someone having a tough childhood. Early, sustained trauma literally, physically reshapes the developing brain. It floods the system with cortisol and damages the regulatory bridge in the prefrontal cortex that stands between an impulse and an action.
So a child has absolutely no choice in the trauma they endure. Their brain is physically altered by it, but the adult still has to be held accountable for their actions later in life.
Both things have to be true, and that requires walking a very careful line, which is the focus of Episode 10.
The careful line.
Yes, we have to hold a structural analysis without falling into learned helplessness. Because if you only look at the structures, the algorithms, the trauma, the legacy hardware, you think nothing can be done. We are all just meat robots.
Right.
But at the same time, we have to demand individual accountability without just scapegoating people while the toxic systems themselves run completely unchanged. You have to hold both realities simultaneously.
Which brings up a really practical grounding question. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, who is just trying to navigate a normal Tuesday?
It's a fair question.
Most of us aren't toppling dictators or blowing the whistle on massive corporate fraud. How do we cultivate this rare, fragile trait of conscience when the headwinds of exploitation are so incredibly strong?
Well, we have to start by closely examining our own psychological gymnastics. Episode 8, The Self in the Mirror, points out that we make exceptions for ourselves constantly.
Oh, for sure. We hold others to incredibly high, uncompromising standards, but we quietly exempt ourselves when we make compromises.
Exactly. And when we do catch ourselves participating in the slow creep, our default instinct is almost always shame rather than guilt.
That distinction between shame and guilt is massive in the source material.
It changes everything. Guilt is about behavior. It says, I did something bad. Guilt can motivate change. It allows for repair.
But shame is different.
Shame is about identity. It says, I am bad. Shame tends to calcify the problem. It paralyzes us, and ironically, it makes us double down on the comfortable lie because admitting we are flawed feels like a death sentence to our identity.
So to cultivate conscience, we have to move away from shame.
Yes, and lean into the discomfort of honestly evaluating our actual behavior.
Which brings us full circle back to the seawall at Stanley Park, because this is incredibly heavy stuff. We have got fragile legacy hardware, toxic cultural water, sophisticated exploiters mapping our dopamine, and a newsfeed full of relentless horrors.
It is a lot to hold.
So how do we take all this heavy understanding and still manage to enjoy a spring afternoon without feeling incredibly guilty, or worse, completely naive?
The answer the sources provide in episode 12 is a concept called lucidity.
Lucidity.
Yes, lucidity asks us to clearly name the reality of the world without letting the horror erase the beauty. And crucially, without letting the beauty act as anesthesia against the horror.
One of the poetic responses in the sources put it so beautifully. It said, the squirrels do not read the news. The rhododendrons open anyway, indifferent and magnificent, as they have always done, while somewhere, always, a city is burning.
What a striking, grounded image, and it is factually true. If we look at that same terrifying newsfeed from April 26, 2026, amidst all the wars, the bombings, and the political strife, there were also moments of profound, ordinary human achievement happening on the exact same day.
Right. The sources note that Sebastian Saul ran a marathon in 1 hour, 59 minutes, and 30 seconds that day. His lungs did not know about the drone strikes in Darfur. His legs did not know about the assassinations in Mali. He just ran.
And exiled Tibetan diaspora voted in a global election to choose their parliamentary representatives across multiple countries. A massive, quiet exercise in democratic hope.
That is amazing.
And in the village of Daybel in southern Lebanon, Italian soldiers carried a brand new statue of Jesus back to the village to replace one that had been smashed with a sledgehammer. Acts of restoration happening right alongside acts of destruction.
The sources hit on this idea perfectly. Evolution handed us a village, and the world kept growing. You do not fix the world by looking away from the pain. That's ignorance.
Exactly.
But you also do not fix it by ignoring the beauty. That is despair. You have to adjust the frame. It is not about finding a perfect mathematical balance on a scale. It is about expanding the container of what you can hold.
It is the refusal to look away from either. The refusal to call the beauty a lie or the horror an illusion. Going back to the lagoon, holding your partner's hand, knowing exactly what is burning in the world, that isn't naivety. That is the ultimate grueling practice of being human.
So, to summarize our deep dive today, we started with a perfect spring day colliding with a horrific news cycle. We learned that the world will always offer both the lever of cruelty and the blossom of spring.
And our thin, fragile prefrontal cortex is simply doing the very best it can with inputs it was never, ever designed to process.
Right. So, to you listening, the next time you're having a beautiful moment and you look at your newsfeed and your stomach instantly drops, I want you to remember this. Do not view that stomach ache as a weakness or a failure of integration.
It is exactly the opposite. It is your physical body honestly refusing to look away.
Yes, it is your legacy hardware working exactly as it should.
Registering the strain of caring about a planet it was simply too small to hold.
And I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over until our next deep dive. It is inspired by a small detail in the materials, specifically from episode 11 regarding neuroplasticity.
Oh, this is a great point.
The sources mentioned that the prefrontal cortex is trainable. We know our biology is plastic enough to be exploited by global algorithms. We know it can be trained to normalize cruelty through the slow creep. But if neuroplasticity works in that direction, could it work in the other?
That is a fascinating question.
Could deliberately, intentionally immersing ourselves in local, village-scale moments of beauty like sitting by a lagoon, fully present, holding the hand of someone you love, could that be the exact neurological training we need?
To build resilience.
Exactly. Maybe noticing the rhododendrons isn't just an escape. Maybe it is the literal biological resistance training required to build our resilience against planetary-scale despair.
Something to seriously think about.
The next time the world feels too heavy, remember the stomachache, remember the legacy hardware, but most importantly, remember to go to the park anyway.